So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth workshop of the CENTRINNO's Expert Focus Group. And today's focus is going to be on vocational training, and I'm really pleased to have you all here as guests today to our event. And we have also some very special guests that have joined us, and I will introduce them to you in a minute. It's been really nice to see you all joining. I see a lot of people are actually keeping to connect. And before we start with the program, I would like to make a small icebreaker just to see who is here in the room and what kind of stakeholders are represented, and if you already participated to our activities. So we have two questions. The first question I would kindly ask you to answer is whether you've already participated in any of our previous workshops. Yes, if in all of them, just some of them, none, but you've read the blog posts or watched the recordings, or if it's a real first time for you. And then there will be a second question to try and understand what type of organization are you representing. There is a sort of a spoiler question, a spoiler answer on EU institution, because today we're pleased to have two representatives of EU institutions from the European Training Foundation and the European Commission Executive Research Agency. And then we have someone from municipalities, from research centers or universities, from Fab Labs, and SMEs or Fab Lab companies. I see that most of you have attended some of the workshops. Someone has caught up, and someone is a totally newbie. It's good. It's good to have a fresh audience, but it's also good to have someone that already is aware on what we're doing. And as for the representation, I see that civil society and the university research centers are the most represented, as well as two persons from the institutions. So you can keep voting for a couple more seconds. But thanks. That was just to know who the audience that joined us is here today. And all right. So I think we can now start with the program. Just here you just have a glimpse of the results, and we can go full screen with today's presentation. So as you can see from the next slide, we are carrying out a focus group, and we've been working on this for this the whole year. We started in March, and we are running until the end of November. And the scope of this focus group is to analyze and dissect and to discuss with expert stakeholders about the key concepts of CENTRINNO, that are heritage, social inclusion, circularity, vocational training, the topic of today, and the Fab City Hubs, that will be the conclusive topic. And the overall scope of CENTRINNO is the implementation of innovative Fab City Hubs in the cities. So what we want to do is to try and disseminate the activities and results we're achieving, to receive feedback and inputs from like-minded stakeholders, and to discuss and to also try and inspire other stakeholders to adopt our approaches. But we also wanted to learn from other project experiences on our key topics. And the best result would also be to try and set routes for future potential synergies and exchanges. We want CENTRINNO to be an important staple in research and in innovation, and we want also that its legacy can build up to new opportunities. So having said that, we can look into the agenda of the day, and we are very happy to have Cristina Levotto and Carolina Becker from OnLeFe, and they will give an introduction of what we mean for vocational training in CENTRINNO, looking towards the toolkit for the CENTRINNO school. And then we're diving deeper into 2 of the 9 city pilots that we're having in CENTRINNO, and that are experimenting the approach to vocational training that we have. And so we're going to Iceland, to Blönduós, to hear their stories in the textile field. And then we go and here we will have Katarina Schneider and Elsa Arnadottir to present their case studies from the Icelandic Textile Center. And then we travel virtual to Geneva to hear about their work with fashion designers in the circular economy and Fab Lab resources. And here we will have Karima Abbas, Teresa Anza from Le Geste in Geneva. And then our guest from the European Commission, from the European Training Foundation, will be Manuela Prina, and she is the head of the Skills Identification and Development Unit at the European Training Foundation. And she will provide a contribution both on the mission of the ETF and the importance of harnessing the potential of local talents at the local level, but she will also react with her comments and impressions on the presentations of the case studies. And we also have Emanuela De Menna, who is a project advisor for Centrinno at the European Research Executive Agency. And of course, she's very welcome to intervene and give her comments as well. And after these presentations, we will have a lot of room for discussion, for conversation, for a sort of a panel discussion, and also to go into an open and lively discussion on the drivers and barrier to uptake and replication. So that's the most interactive moment, but we're going to have a lot of interactive moments throughout the presentation. So please stay tuned, and if you have questions, so we will be enabling a Slido polls right after the first presentation, so you can raise all your questions. So I think my time is up now, and without any further ado, I give just a quick overview on Centrinno, maybe on the next slide. What is the scope and mission and vision of Centrinno? We want to hold true to the ecological challenges of our time, boosting a diverse, inclusive, innovative urban economy, and trying to use heritage as a catalyst for innovation and social inclusion. And our mission is to try and rethink the way cities govern their material resources, to foster social inclusion through craftsmanship, culture, and heritage, and to shape new socioeconomic and sustainable identities of industrial historic sites. We work with 27 partners across 10 European countries, and with 9 city pilots from Tallinn to Barcelona, passing through Milan, Geneva, Paris, Amsterdam, Zagreb, and Copenhagen. And really, without any further ado, I will leave the floor to Cristina Livotto for a presentation on the vocational training and Centrinno School. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here with us this afternoon. My name is Cristina Livotto, and today I'm talking on behalf also of my colleague Carolina Becker and the team of On Le Fait, which is a makerspace Fab Lab based in Geneva, Switzerland. The objective, the next 20 minutes, I will try to give you an overview of what the Centrinno Consortium has developed over the last 3 years regarding the Centrinno School program. And the good news is that everything I will tell you will be summarized, but also detailed in the Centrinno School Kit that will be available to anyone interested to develop programs related to education with similar objectives and for similar publics. Next, I'd like to start with a very basic question, which is what is a Centrinno School? And answering this question took some time for the consortium, because education is a very large domain. Everybody has his own approach, interpretation, and we needed to align all the partners on the ultimate goal for the Centrinno School program. Here I highlighted some key points. So the first one is that Centrinno is a program that focuses on the transformation of urban industrial sites. So the education had to be linked to these urban challenges, that is the environment we are working on, to support craftsmen of the future and think circularly. And the third element, the core of the Centrinno School program, is to acquire practical skills and a maker mindset. And we will have the time afterwards to better understand what we need with this expression. The second important question to ask ourselves Flavio, is why does it matter? Why we are putting together researchers, practitioners, different actors to develop and implement and test this program. There are several research. Here I'm citing and quoting a research from the research program Cities of Making that states that providing innovative spaces with different stakeholders and with collaborations which are cross-disciplinary has a huge effect, an important impact for urban manufacturing and to develop new dynamics, new economic models. So in short, to support and sustain learning ecosystems as a positive outcome on the education and on the economic system, where these multi-stakeholder spaces and initiatives take place. Next, so to be a bit more concrete, after having defined the ultimate goal, the other challenge for us was to identify some criteria to identify what a Centrino School program is. There are plenty of educational programs about making, about inclusion, about heritage, but we had an internal reflection to understand what makes an educational program a Centrino School program. And to reach to get to our objectives, there are we identified a few criteria. So the first one for us, it was important to meet in person, or in the worst case, to have a hybrid programs. Why? Because the community is one of the pillars of the Centrino School program, and to meet and exchange face-to-face is an element that we cannot take away from our approach. So it's done with people. The actions that we developed, they are not pure research or surveys. They are all programs that have been tested and developed and implemented with people and with a variety of different people. So not only in terms of publics, but also in terms of collaborators and stakeholders. So it's not just one organization that is developing a one-man show, but it's a real co-creation process that takes time, but that in the end it's much more efficient in terms of results. We decided to be a Centrino School initiative. We need to be the challenge, the initiative should be in relationship with the surroundings. Our 9 pilot cities are working on a specific area, on a specific site in their cities, and we wanted this program to be related with that because in these industrial zones that are transforming, that are evolving, there are a lot of social challenges, there are a lot of issues, and our scope was to put together the educational part with these really concrete and important issues. The last 2 points that are one is very important, the other is one more is more questionable, is about the skills. So we are well aware that programs of awareness, of introducing, of presenting are a fundamental step in the learning process. But for Centrino, we wanted to focus on the skill acquisition. So at the end of any initiative, any program, any workshop that was implemented, we should prove that the participants learned a skill they didn't have before. And related to that, there's the issue of a certification that would require an entire hour to discuss, is when a certification is needed, which are the barriers. And this is basically almost a parallel research to show the Commission, to show our partners that sometimes being certified is essential, but not always, at least in our context of learning. In terms of public, we were very large. Basically, we use two categories. The ones of professionals, so that they are participating to a learning, to a training, because they have an interest related to their job or the future job, or the citizens, so members of our society who wants to learn new skills or related to making, to urban manufacturing, circularity, for their private life, for the leisure, or for other activities that are not their main job. Next. So if you followed me until now, you understand that here we are describing a huge scenario. You can put everything in it, basically, even if we tried to identify criteria, etc. And based on the work of the ambitions of each pilot, we managed to cluster cities based on their main focus. We had 3 cities, Geneva, Milan, and Paris, who decided to work mainly with adults and professionals. So what we call the continuous learning, adult training. 3 cities, Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Blondus, that mostly collaborated with schools, either at post mandatory education or with vocational schools. So basically collaboration with formal education, with something that is already well established. And other cities like Copenhagen, Tallinn, and Zagreb, who that preferred to focus, because of the development of the pilot, on the community. So to address their initiatives, the target group was directly their citizens. And so the activity were, we can say that they were in the domain of informal education. That, of course, we are not, we try to always think a bit out of the box. We know that the situations are complex, the ecosystems are complex. So even if in some cases we decided to focus on adults and professionals, the links, the exchange with the schools, with the community were there, and that in all the cases. And that was, of course, an element of to reach the program. But it was important for us to try to find a main target group to avoid to disperse our energies. Next. We developed some tools, some methodologies that were basically transversal, because they could be used in different contexts for different target groups. The first one is open schooling. That is a methodology that is strongly supported by the Commission at European level. That is very much aligned with the objectives of Centrino, because in 2 words, it puts the school at the center of a learning ecosystem. And that's exactly what we want to do, and we try to do, and we managed to do in Centrino. And another tool that is more a tool than a methodology. So the next one, Flavio, is that you will find in the Fab City toolkit is a kind of roadmap. So it's not rocket science, but basically help anyone who wants to design an educational program to take into consideration all the steps. So to start from the scoping, so which are the objectives, until the legacy. So basically to decompose the whole process and to help you ask yourselves some questions to make the program as successful as possible. So that's what basically we did, and we are still doing, of course, and we will continue also to do after the end of Centrinno. I wanted to spend a few minutes, if you, Flavio, can move on, about the skills. But first of all, because it's something that is very dear to me as a concept, those of acquiring skills, and also because, as I'm sure most of you know, 2023 is the European Year of Skills. So it clearly is one of the hot topics for our society. And in Centrinno, we had also a lot of discussions about skills because, as I said before, for education, also about skills, there are different philosophies, there are different interpretations, different schools of thoughts. But the conclusion was that the skills we are talking about are technical. So it could be like learning how to repair a chair or to use a machine, but are also transversal. So the technical skills are all those skills that are relevant to making, to manufacturing, to circular economy. And transversal skills are those who help develop new ways of producing, thinking, working. So how you collaborate, how you share your results, etc. And in the next slide, I'm showing you a snapshot of a board that we on Lefebvre developed with Metabolic, another partner of the CENTRINNO consortium, where we detailed all the skills that we need for this, for the circular and for the digital transformation. Transition. For example, you see here it's a snapshot of the manufacturing part, where we identify different phases from design, produce, recycle, and we were very specific. Now, I hope there will be a way to share with you this board, because, for example, we said, okay, to share, but to share you need to have someone dedicated to logistics with a specific skills that are not necessarily already there on the market, or to use, you need someone that has an expertise in laundering clothes in a proper way. So we are very happy about the result because basically we all agree that we need new skills for this transition, but thanks to these works that was possible thanks to Centrinno, we managed to show skills at a very granular level. I would like to finish this introduction about the Centrinno school program with the next slide about some of the challenges and the issues that we experienced. So it's not a projection, it's real life. So Flavio, if you can move on, thanks. And these are four that to me they are very evident because they were more or less transversal in different cities and for different programs and with different target groups. The first one is schools are overwhelmed, and so to try to incorporate new elements or new ways of teaching informal education is a real challenge. and it takes actions bottom up, but also more high level to be really efficient. The second one is about the diversity of stakeholders, because ideally, and I think that most of you will agree that it's a plus to be to work with actors and partners with different backgrounds, with different missions. But in reality, this means that you need to foresee enough time to get to know each other, to get to know the language, and especially for education, to really have a common vocabulary. Evaluating the risk. CENTRINNO is a research action program. And for me, for education, the research part is important because we are making hypotheses, we are making assumptions. We are convinced for many reasons that are correct, but to be when they are tested, when they are retested, especially if we think about schools, if we think about people in professionals in recession, we are taking a risk on their life. So we are investing time of their life to acquire skills that we think that are important for the transition, but we are not sure. So for me, this is an important part to evaluate the risk of this kind of innovation in education. And the last point is about certification. As I already mentioned, that it can be at the same time something that is very helpful. In other cases, it's just the barriers and bureaucracy. My last message is that over the last month, over the last years, we had this fantastic opportunity to think about education for making, for circularity, etc. But there are still a lot of questions that should be explored, that I'm sure other researchers already started to tackle. But that I hope that thanks to the experience developed during the CENTRINNO program, we also built the agency to deal with them, and it's from the role of companies to the attractiveness of jobs in circular economy, the readiness of the market to absorb this new professional, etc. So as I find very exciting that we did a lot, but every time that we were advancing, we were opening new doors and having new questions. And this, I think it's a good sign that we are going in the right direction. Fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christina. It was a really nice presentation. And I would like to launch a quick Slido poll, and you can take your mobile phones or follow the link that has been presented in the chat, because we would like to get a bit of a feedback and to answer these questions. So we have 3 questions for you to answer on how strategic you believe it would be to organize professional training about digital craftsmanship for your local communities. Please don't be shy and answer to the Slido. And you can also type if you have any questions. There is a Q&A section on Slido where you can pose any kind of question you may have and you may want to raise, as well as any sort of comments you want to have. We're going to have this as a quick interactive moment. If you want to raise any question, please type them in the chat. We have time. We have just a couple of minutes for this exercise. But if there is a question popping up, we will be happy to pose it to Christina. Otherwise, we can just move on, and we will have time, of course, for more discussion afterwards. I don't see any questions coming up, but I see that most think that would be halfway strategic. So score from 1 to 5, most of you will be saying 3. Okay, so we can move to the second question. That would be this one. So, do you believe that your community would participate to workshops about circular economy skills? Do you believe, in other words, do you believe there is interest for innovative skills about circular economy within your local community? It's quite a quick reactions, not many, only 3. I will leave a couple more minutes, but it goes on the. I would be curious to know why you believe there is no interest about circular economy. If you want to comment this in the Q&A section. But it seems there is rather quite an interest in the local communities. So, and then there would, let's give one more minute about this. And then there would be a third question we can ask, and it would be this one. So more, that's a bit more specific. And would you be keen on organizing a hackathon with vocational schools in your region? So this is something you can also reach out to Christina in case you are keen on replicating this innovative methodology. I hope there is quite interest, even though someone says not so much on the hackathon. If you want to comment in the Q&A, you may do so. We will leave the slide open for a little bit more, so you can keep providing your questions. You can keep typing. I will stop the poll in a second. But the slide is still there, so you can still keep raising questions. And now we can go back to our presentations. So once again, please a round of applause, a virtual applause to Christina on her presentation. And we move to Iceland now, to the case study of Blondus. So Katarina Schneider, the floor is yours for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So our presentation is called Sharing Skills and Stitching Ties Across Generations. Love you sharing the slides.
The slides are being shared already.
Okay, great. So my name is Katarina Schneider. I'm a project manager at the Textile Center and have been a part of the Blondus pilot team since the beginning of CENTRINNO. I have a cold, so bear with me. Fingers crossed I don't lose my voice halfway through this. But yes. So next slide, please. So I want to start with a short overview of vocational training in Iceland. We work with the definition of vocational training as education and skill-based training programs that prepare people for a specific job, trade, or craft. In Iceland, almost all VET is offered at upper secondary level. Almost all initial vocational training comprises certified trades and is built on an apprentice system, where most of the education takes place at school, but workplace training is also necessary. Holding a qualification is valued by the labor market, but only legally necessary for certified trades, such as electricians, masons, builders, plumbers. So it may not come as a surprise that almost 2/3 of the students who choose VET are males, and the most popular programs are electrical, building, and mechanical studies. There are lifelong learning programs for adults offered via various education institutions all around the country, for example, Fagskolin and the Education and Training Service Center. The participation in lifelong learning, by the way, education focused on personal development, is above EU average for the 25 to 64-year-olds. It's also important to remind ourselves about just how small Iceland is. There are only about 390,000 inhabitants that live in the entire country, with more than 2/3 of the population living in and around Reykjavik, the capital city area. And most companies in Iceland are very, very small or medium-sized, with much less than 250 employees. And the main economic sectors are tourism, manufacturing industry, and fisheries. Next slide, please. About textile education in Iceland. Iceland used to be a land of knitters and weaving and weavers. Trading twill woven on the warp-weighted loom and other textiles were exported and played a vital role in Iceland's economy for centuries. Textile work was taught from generation to generation, literally sharing skills and stitching ties over generations. When the so-called women's colleges, kvennaskólinn in Icelandic, were established in the 1870s, handcrafts like embroidery, sewing, knitting were part of the curriculum. Weaving was always taught depending on the availability of space and equipment. Crafts or school industry lessons for children were not included in national curricula until the 1930s. Crafts were given a mandatory status and established as a subject in 1948. Interestingly, instruction was gender-based, with craft for boys and textiles for girls until 1977. Women's schools were closed down in the 1970s, and then the educational focus and interest shifted from handcrafts to art and fashion design. Today, the former Women's College in Blönduós is home of the Textile Center and the O's residency. Next slide, please. So what are the consequences? We now struggle with a gendered perception of handcrafts as grandma skills, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means it's not taken very seriously. It's considered a pastime activity for women rather than a professional occupation. There's a quite narrow understanding of textiles, primarily knitting or fashion design. Textile classes can be found in lifelong learning programs, even in classes for fun, but there are very limited education opportunities other than that. The Iceland University of the Arts offers a BA program in fashion design. The Reykjavik School of Visual Arts offers a diploma in textiles. There's also VET training for dressmakers and tailors taught via the technical college. But there is a lack of innovation and professional non-art training and certification in the field, especially for educators. For example, there are no training programs for digital weaving, and there's a lack of knowledge regarding bio, digital, and e-textiles. There's very little textile production left in the country, and in many cases, only part of the process happens in Iceland. Very few are aware that almost all textiles in Iceland are imported, and way too many clothes end up in landfill. We see that the environmental impacts of the textile industry have been neglected when it comes to education, which is why we think there are many opportunities in developing sustainable textile production in Iceland, using local resources and paying more attention to circular design, the life cycle of textiles. Next slide, please. So this is where the Blönduós pilot comes in. One of the main goals of the Textile Center as an institution and within the CENTRINNO project is to contribute to the recreation of a new type of textile industry in Iceland, with an emphasis on local production using sustainable resources. We want to raise awareness on the importance of sustainability and the opportunity that lies within rethinking and reevaluating traditional crafts and adapting the principles of the circular economy. So also finding new ways to educate and subjects to explore, connecting the key players in the field are crucial in this context. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of some of our pilot activities and main aims. We want to create incentive and raise awareness on these matters, such as textile waste, and increase the value of seemingly worthless byproducts, such as second-class wool, for example, here in Iceland. So we hosted a wool idea marathon in 2021, a hybrid event with over 100 participants and the President of Iceland awarding the best ideas. We want to connect traditional crafts and innovation in textiles. So we facilitate collaborations with makers and students working on up and recycling projects who come and use the equipment in our facilities, both traditional and new. And we also run a textile residency program where residents explore work all across the field. We created a space for digital experimentation, sampling and learning, the lab, textile lab, more on that in a bit. And then there's working towards a new curriculum for textiles in adult education and building a textile cluster, connecting the key players, also more on that in a bit. Next slide, please. So in May 2021, the Textile Center's Textile Lab was formally opened in Blönduós. It's the first of its kind in Iceland and offers access to specialized textile equipment and digital technology, including TC2 digital looms, felt loom, laser cutter, tufting guns, laser printer, digital embroidery and knitting machine. Since we opened, we've hosted many different student groups, both from Icelandic universities, but also international, artists and residents, makers, members from the community, and we've done this all year round. Organized lots of open houses, workshops, training sessions. We also hosted the Fab Academy program last year until the beginning of this year, hired a lab manager and a lab assistant. We've been working with the Education and Training Service Center to develop a new curriculum for textiles in adult education, focusing on both traditional handcrafts and innovation in textiles. It's really important to know that before the Textile Lab, there was no space for researching and experimenting like that in Iceland. And the TC2s and the knitrid are not accessible anywhere else in the country, just here at the Textile Center. Next slide, please. There was a project conducted by our pilot partners from the University of Iceland called Heldur Þræði, Keeping Threads. It was a textile business and innovation course developed and taught via the university in collaboration with us as part of CENTRINNO. It was a 9-week hybrid program that included different lessons, online lectures, project work, individual consultation, and site visits at the Textile Lab. I was taught twice. The final ideas were presented to a jury. And the main idea of this project was to encourage people in the textile field, women especially, given that less than 30% of self-employed entrepreneurs in Iceland are female, to connect and gain knowledge on business management, administration, and other aspects related to business, and then realize their business ideas. We also really wanted to get feedback on which skills participants felt they were lacking so far. So lots of people participated in these courses, 73 women and 4 men, and many of them have since applied for grants to further develop their ideas. I think we have the project manager of this on the call, so maybe she can answer some questions later. But yes, next slide, please. Mapping stakeholders and defining, for example, education needs within textiles has also been a priority from the get-go of CENTRINNO. We've done the Kumu mapping of textile makers and education institutions in Iceland. We always ask for workshop participant feedback, and we did a need analysis in collaboration with the University of Iceland pilot team, and potential uses of the Textile Lab. So since 2021, we've been also working on building a textile cluster in Iceland, conducted a survey in collaboration with the Institute of Social Studies Science, and organized a mini conference, including online lectures and a work session. 72 of the stakeholders that participated agreed to take on a role in preparing for the foundation of a cluster. So we think the value would come through increased knowledge, certified education, more skills, stronger networks, increased investment opportunities, and just the ability to innovate within the textile community. There's more of cooperation, sharing knowledge. Next slide, please. So what are the outcomes of our project so far? We see that a rethinking and reevaluation of textiles and textile production in Iceland, traditional handcraft skills and craftsmanships are needed. For example, knowing about traditional weaving is essential to be able to use a digital loom. You can't not know how to warp a loom if you want to use a digital one. And traditional weaving patterns can be reimagined using modern technology and software. So there is this connection, and you need to teach about both. Training should be more accessible for people with no or little formal education, or people that are inactive in the labor market. There might be more skills out there than we realize, or more skills than people themselves would classify as a skill. And we definitely need more collaboration with businesses, because that would be helpful to determine what is needed on their side to move forward a textile industry and production in Iceland. So there's clearly a significant interest in textile entrepreneurship, in developing new products in line with the circular economy. So this means there are great opportunities in connecting the traditional world and textile innovation, creative sustainability, business management, and so forth, and increase the use of new technologies for textile production. At this point in time, however, it's very difficult for makers to succeed in a market dominated by imported textiles. Production costs in Iceland, which is one of the most expensive countries in the world, are very high. So this is why spaces like the Textile Lab provide access to digital equipment and expertise, teaching, are crucial for makers in the researching and experimenting stage. When makers have access to equipment like we provide here, a felt loom or say a machine developed to separate wool fibers, and an expert teaching them how to operate the machine, it opens up new opportunities and can result in new product ideas. We've already seen this happen several times in the past 2 years. For example, one of our most recent collaborations in the lab is a project where we are experimenting with a bacteria sourced from food waste materials to create the color purple, which can then be used to sustainably dye wool. None of this would have happened without CENTRINNO and the Textile Lab. So the textile landscape in Iceland is characterized by individuals and small SMEs struggling to establish themselves and then survive. And this is why a textile cluster would really strengthen collaboration and help move forward production, education, and policy making. I guess the big question is, how can we make sure vocational training programs in textiles are innovatively designed to not only impart technical skills, but also foster creativity and adaptability, preparing individuals for a rapidly evolving industry. And we don't have the answer either yet, but we think that we're already a big step closer to when we started, and hopefully even closer before the end of CENTRINNO. So this is it from me, and I think Elsa will later take over for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Katarina. And this is indeed quite a big question, and maybe also Manuela has some insights from her experience throughout Europe in vocational training and in harnessing talents. So if she wants to speak up here, it's good time. We have a few more minutes for questions. Please, if you wish, you may also raise them through Slide. There is the link is in the chat. And I see that some questions have already popped up. And in particular, there is one question that says, if there are any businesses flourishing after your pilot, after your activities, like have you seen someone triggering and starting up some new businesses or activities in Blondes or in Iceland after your pilot? And then the mic is open for a couple more minutes for specific questions. Or also, Elsa, if you want to comment something.
It's early days to know how if the business is flourishing, but definitely products have been resulted from using the Textile Lab. But maybe Hilda can add to it because the university was having those business classes.
Hi, I'm Hilda. The business are taking their first steps.
Introduce myself. My name is Elsa, and I work at the Textile Center with Katarina.
Yeah, and my name is Hilda, and the businesses has taken the first step, and they're just on the way. So they're in the early
about
days.
the survival? No.
Yeah, I think we lost her. We do have another question from the Slido, from the chat boxes. That is, how will the Textile Lab survive after the end of CENTRINNO? Which is a core question, and indeed the legacy. So if you have a plan you want to answer about this.
that's a constant work. We have at least secured it until next year. And we are working on recognition from the government to do a agreement. So we have long-term staff working there.
All right, perfect. Don't know if there are any other questions for Katarina and Elsa.
We also have a question here about how many people you reached with your program. This program was attended by 77 persons, 73 women and 4 men. And 65 participants have applied for a grant since they started to develop their product.
All right,
So
yeah. I haven't read out this question because it was answered in the presentation of Katarina. So who wrote it might have found the answer already, but it's good to provide some numbers to refresh the mind. Like 75 participants, 77 participants is maybe a really good number on an experimental short-term program. So I don't know if there are any further questions or comments. If not, we can move and travel to Geneva and give the floor to Karima and Therese from Le Geste on their experience. So please, Karima, I believe floor is yours.
Thank you, Pietro. Thank you, everyone, for sharing some precious time with us. My name is Karima. I was born in Algeria, and my first words are to honor our sisters and brothers from Morocco and Libya facing challenging times that are evidence-based consequences of our contemporary way of life. This questions the way we live, the way we produce, the way we consume, themes that are definitely in the core of the research program of CENTRINNO. How can we make a change? Next slide, please. We are part of the Geneva pilot of CENTRINNO. And a few words about us. Le Geste is a project of the non-profit organization Au Fil du Geste, created in year 2014, that focuses on textile-related projects, implying research on heritage, transfer of knowledges, local production, social inclusion, raising awareness, advocacy and sustainability, and of course, design. We are a team of 5 people, 5 women actually. And here I am with my colleagues, Therese and Ifetayo, who are involved in the CENTRINNO program. Next slide, please. Thank you to Cristina and to Katarina for their presentations with a wide scope and very rich references. And now we will go very locally and I will present some of our action plan this year and workshops that mainly concentrated on 3 out of the 5 pillars of CENTRINNO that are vocational training, circular economy, and social inclusion. So it is small scale experiences that we could run with sufficient time to show results and that are specific to the local needs we identified in Geneva. Next slide, please. So we start with a workshop and actually a part of CENTRINNO program is to identify local stakeholders that we would get involved in the research and further, hopefully. And the University of Arts and Design of Geneva, the head, is one of the key stakeholders for vocational training. And nevertheless, the campus of the head is located in the exact same area of the third place, Mako, where the Fab Lab On Fait is, and our studio, which is the anchor of the Geneva pilot in CENTRINNO. Next slide, please. And the main research aspect of the reprocessing textile workshop was to experiment with students in design, how we can create, develop, innovate in designs from resources, material that is already existing, versus a classical way of designing that starts with an idea, a sketch, and then the production of new material for serving the production of a product. So we started from dead stocks of fabric that had for us two interesting properties: the quality of the fiber, and it was challenging in terms of design, since the colors and the patterns were pretty dull, as you can see. Next slide, please. The idea of the workshop was to experiment circular economy in design and how we can recreate, reinvent textile with the study of patterns that we would print on already existing fabrics, both with serigraphy and stamps. Next one, please. So a part of the week-long workshop took place in the university itself, and another part in the Fab Lab On Le Fait in Mako. It was the opportunity for the students to create stamps out of the study of pattern they had made in the first days. And what we noticed is that for quite a few students, it was their first visit to Mako. They could eventually figure out the resources we have in Mako, and hopefully for their future projects. Next slide, please. Here we can see some of the newly created fabrics. And next one, please. As results, we witnessed a pretty strong commitment from the students throughout the whole process of the workshop. And from a designer point of view, the reprocessing textile printing kept its promises. Now a few words about the outcomes. We noticed that being present at the university fostered the linking up with the Mako, inviting them to come and work in the Mako. And then another one regarding circular economy, we consider that the experimentation on textile could be replicated to other materials, such as wood, glass, for instance. Another outcome is that it raised awareness on production and pollution for designers. And finally, one shot is not enough. And future steps would be to consider how these kind of workshops could integrate the curriculum of the university. Thank you. Next, please. I will now present the second of the workshops of this action plan of year 2023. Le GEST started a collaboration with CEFAM. It is located in the suburbs of Geneva. We started the collaboration in year 2019, and the two previous workshops were held there It was mainly about transfer of knowledges and creating a warm, convivial place for practicing arts and crafts. And this time within the CENTRINNO research program, our goal was different. Even though we were invited to train women on textile techniques of patchwork and appliqué, that was the demand of the CEFAM. Next, please. And again, the specificity of Geneva, of CENTRINNO, is that although we work in local programs, we're constantly inspired by the other pilots of the program. And in this specific case, we highly benefited from the shared experiences from the Icelandic pilot. And with their insights, we reshaped the whole workshop, putting at the center the empowerment of women. So the inspiration for the workshop went from the study of several contemporary artists, women, and we would work in parallel of their work. And we also included in the workshop a guided tour of an exhibition in Geneva. Next slide, please. We invited women to work in small groups, and that was a challenge to them. They were more comfortable working on their own, but we succeeded in having them working together. And we also invited them several times to speak about themselves and to speak about the process of their creations. Next slide, please. The final result of the workshop consisted on 2 panels made out of the small group creations, for which we agreed commonly on the composition. And now a word about the outcomes. The workshop lasted for 3 months, and it was 1 afternoon a week. And that time allowed a process for women to overcome the fear to stand up and speak in public. The workshop consisted also on a safe place for valorization for the participants, according to what they expressed from recognizing their own talents and sharing their reflections. Next slide, please. Now I will give a very specific example. Here is Marzier. She's now a member of Le Geste. And this is also with the idea that CENTRINNO is about the legacy of our program and concrete changes that could occur. An issue faced by migrant women is that they are pretty isolated, and joining the job market is a way for them to express their talent, connect with the wider population of Geneva, and make a living. In the case of Marzier, who joined a program we ran in 2018, that was a professional integration program, we kept on collaborating with her. She has know-how that no other member of Le Geste has, and we were happy to hire her for the residency program. Next slide. Please, I will be speaking now of, which is the 3rd action we ran this year. We identified a gap between the resources the fashion designer have when they're at university and then what follows their graduation. Our open call for this residency targeted designers with advanced prototypes that we would support during 11 weeks to the final phase of prototypes in order to enter the production and finally the market. For this residency, we have a dedicated team with a coordinator and a seamstress, Martier. And we have a few coaching sessions. Next slide, please. Now, if we speak of the specific challenges we have in Geneva, one of them is that it is a very little market for designers. Another one is that there are very few production structures. And the third challenge is that at this time, designers do not make a living. Our coordinator, Chloe, for the residency, made a 6 months training at the Fab Lab on le fait, and she was guiding the designers in the use of the laser cutter and tools of the Fab Lab. And the residency is also the opportunity through our network to identify local production, whether it's in Geneva or in Switzerland, and fabric suppliers in the German part of Switzerland. Next slide, please. The designers involved in the first round of the residency are now trained to use the resources of the Fab Lab in an autonomous way. We could verify that the residency helps to link up with the Fab Lab tools. It was a way to break the wall for a reason we have not identified yet. It took the designers to come to the residency to be able to go to the Fab Lab. There is a very strong benefit of using a Fab Lab tools to decrease the costs of production. We previously saw some of the silk scarves that Celeste is working on, and I mean, just by cutting the scarves, we do not need to sew them. And we could also verify that the residency fills the gap we had identified, given the number of demand we receive for the next rounds of residencies, and from the satisfaction of the designers we hosted. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Karima. It was a really nice and interesting presentation. And again, I would like to raise a few questions that already popped up in the Slido, but there you can also raise more questions going through the link embedded in the chat or using the QR code. And I already see 3 nice questions, and there is one that's been ranked the top is like, how does the EU support these small-scale businesses and more in general women empowerment and autonomy in the job or the business market? So this is also a question for of course our you guests. Maybe it will be also answered in the in Manuela's presentation, so I will take this for the moment, but I see another question, like most of the EU cities are seeing rising of rents for homes, but also offices and labs. How are we making more sustainable to work in the city for small businesses? Karima and probably also Christina can answer on this, as well as Katarina and Elsa. Basically, everyone who's actually implementing an innovation, small scale lab has challenges on this topic, and maybe some answers or open questions as well. You know, if there are any suggestions about this latest question. There was one more specific, probably for the experience in Geneva. If these women that have been participating to your workshops, did they perhaps develop personal bonds among participants, so that they could sort of create a small community going beyond the activity? So, in other words, I believe the question was your training activities also a catalyst for community development and social engagement and social empowerment of migrant women?
This leads us to the step 2. I mentioned the 2 panels we created, and we have not given them back yet to the CEFAM. And the workshop took place from January to March. We're now in September. It will be maybe October. I would be very happy to have their stories, like 6 months after that. What happened? And to come exactly with the question I'm asked right now. And that would be, from our point of view, a way to get some more information to go further with the research.
Great, thanks, Karima. That's really good and interesting plan. And there is also another question: that do participants get a chance of learning about funding opportunities or seed grants or other opportunities on how to start a business? So they learn the practical skills, but they also learn like the market skills somehow.
Speaking of filling a gap, actually, the university has a program where the designers can develop their business plan. So they have this type of they get support with that. And the gap we identified was more in the product itself. So Celeste, that we could see in some of the pictures, she was actually in both programs.
All right, I see a raised hand from Cristina Livotto, please.
Yeah, no, I want to compliment what Karima just said, that the question indeed touches an important point, because we understood at some point that it was important to have both sides, and we are starting a program in October that has a part about the skills, about the machines, so technical, and the part that is more about business and fundings, etc.
Thank you very much, Christina. I don't see any more questions popping in on the slide nor in the chat box. And since we're a bit late, I think it's time to leave the floor to our guest from the European Training Foundation. So Manuela Crina, head of skills identification development of the ETF. Please, the floor is yours, and we can stop sharing the screen, I believe, because she will speak on full picture. So Manuela, please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pietro, and thank you to all of you. It has been really a pleasure to be invited, and also to have the opportunity to know about the project and the great activities that you are implementing. Let me share a couple of words about the European Training Foundation. I guess not many of you know about the ETF. Correct me if I'm wrong. If somebody knows about the ETF, just raise your hand, because I would be very surprised. And it's actually normal that you don't know much about the ETF, because the European Training Foundation, which is an agency of the European Union that is specialized in human capital development issues, in particular vocational education and training, does not work within the European Union. We are actually, in fact, responsible to support countries outside the EU, but also, of course, to build bridges between the European Union and countries outside the EU. And I thank Karima for mentioning Morocco and Libya. Those are among the countries we work with. We work with the Western Balkans, with Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, with the Mediterranean countries, and also Caucasus and Central Asia, and more also with the countries in the African continent. We are based in Torino, so we are in Italy. And I always say that we are based in Italy, but we know more about countries that are far away as compared to countries in the EU. In reality, we have within our mandate an important role in ensuring an exchange between the EU and partner countries that for many years has been mainly, the EU somehow sharing, and I use this term, broadcasting towards other countries about its good practices. Nowadays, instead, we see very much a peer exchange and also a very important process of learning together and looking into issues together. And now when we come to the subject of today's workshop and also your presentations and the questions that have been raised, I would like to pose the attention on some issues. The first is, Christina mentioned the Year of Skills, a very important initiative. We are in the middle of it. Actually, the Year of Skills will last and accompany us until 2024. But just yesterday, the President of the European Commission, she mentioned in her annual State of the Union that the labor market and skills shortages are among the 3 priorities that the European Union needs really to address for the future. And in this, I think it's very important that we pose the attention on one side to sectors that are very much, let's say, impacted by technology. There is a lot of talk about energy, telecommunication, construction, you name it. But we have to ensure that the attention on crafts and also on professional areas that talk about the community and bring different elements together is also brought forward as a priority. And this is indeed part of the European Union priorities as regards skills. The second is the description of the different elements of the centers that are involved in the project that very much link up with one of the priorities of the skills agenda of the EU, which is also important in countries outside the EU, which is the vocational excellence. So we're not only after, doing something, or providing some training program. We need this training, this vocational education and training to be excellent. And this excellence has several characteristics. I think some are very similar to what you have explored in the project. And the ETF, together with the European Commission and many partners, both in the EU, but also in countries outside the EU, is working on an excellence label, which will support vocational education and training centers, not only to be awarded, but to be in a pathway towards excellence, because we know that in our job, working with people and working with training, we are never done. There is always something to change and something to look forward to. So this community that is the COVES, the vocational education centers, come together around an aspiration, around a commitment. The ETF has a network of vocational education centers across 40 countries, including European Union, but also countries outside the EU and also Africa and Asia, with almost 200 80 centers have joined now the network. Many of those centers actually work also in the craft sector, and it's very interesting to exchange experiences at international level on this domain. This is a priority for the EU, and it's also a priority in the different calls of the Erasmus Plus, which is something that is very important as part of the support to the sustainability of the experiences and the change process that vet centers need to undertake to embrace this future. Then there is a third point of attention that I think it's important, which is the role of vocational education and training in innovation systems. So now we have many different actors that are part of the game, both looking at any sector, but also looking at skills provision. It's not only the school, it's also the Fab Lab, it's the innovation center, it's the company, is civil society organizations. So we need to look into this ecosystem that actually supports the delivery of an objective. For many years, VET has been a bit neglected in this ecosystem. So we had much more presence, for example, of universities or of other actors that are part of the skills ecosystem. Today, we recognize, including through research and evidence, and I will share with you in a moment a few references, that VET centers are exactly part of this ecosystem. We saw an example as regards circular economy, trying to test, come up with ideas, have a safe environment where we can also pilot ideas as well as go into the production or into the prototyping of a product or a service or a process. It's something where VET schools are extremely pioneer and well positioned for a number of characteristics, including having the equipment, putting the availability of the experience and the expertise of teachers and trainers, finding also the ground in students that are normally happy to be part of innovation processes. And here come my last input for you, which is what also some of you mentioned in the presentation, is the link with different actors. And so where is my place and how do I make myself sustainable as well as visible? On this, several years ago, and it's another reference that I will share with you in a moment, we undertook in many countries a project that we call the entrepreneurial communities, where we looked at experiences of actors coming together to address a problem, a challenge, but also to implement a vision and bringing to reality. This is definitely something where we know that it's extremely important to connect also VET providers, and where we saw the success, including some experiences where different generations have been brought together, or where issues in terms of possibilities for innovation or solving social challenges have been really possible because of the collaboration and because of the mutual benefit which is built within the community. So this community is basically a characteristic itself of circular economy, where actors come together to exploit, to benefit, and to deliver together. And this is also another area that we will see growing in the next years, also as part of the Erasmus Plus calls. A last point, one of the things that Pietro raised during the conversation, the support to small businesses. I just mentioned something that the President of the Commission launched exactly yesterday during the State of the Union, which is a commitment towards SMEs. As you know, the industrial policies and many of the policies of the EU normally are very much focused on big sectors and big industries. And we know that the large majority of our economic strength relies on small businesses. So it's very important to observe that this is now taken forward at the highest level. So we expect in the next months to see news as regard small businesses and in particular the support to women. And I'll share with you in the chat a few links. I saw Pietro nervous because I think time is running. But I'm happy also after the workshop, if you reach out and you want to know more, I'm really delighted to be in touch.
Actually, thank you very much, Manuela. And actually, no, I was hoping you had a bit more time to stay with us for a couple of questions on a panel discussion, because I think the four elements you brought about also match a bit with some questions and some open points we were having and we were discussing while preparing this workshop. And I think it would be nice to have sort of a round of reactions on you, because there was a core question that's probably I would start with the hardest, and then but there was about, okay, we are recognizing the need for innovative skills. We are training, we are developing these innovative skills. We're building a sort of a community around circular economy. But then oftentimes we build small communities that are way smaller than the market and than the business as usual. So how eventually are we able to make sure that the skills we train and we develop are absorbed and integrated in the market? So that's a big question. I don't know if you have experience or
you know, it's something my immediate reaction is it's skills, let's say the transition from education and training to the labor market, or from skills formation to skills utilization, is not something that is a linear process. It's like innovation. People think that innovation is linear. Innovation is not linear. And so it's also skills. Skills, it's not a linear thing. That time is over. It's not anymore that we go to school, we get our diploma, and then we go to the labor market, we send our CV, and we start working. No, I think, it's the experience of all of us. That's not the story, right? So the question, we have to change the question. And the question is, what can I do while I'm focusing on delivering a skills development or a skills formation process? What can I do to start already working on the transition to the labor market? Here we have answers. The first is the contacts with the community, especially if you are a provider, but also if you are an employer. I very often talk to small businesses. They tell me, I don't find people. And then I give them, 5 different mention of tools that are very are available for everybody to look for people. And they normally don't know those tools exist, right? If you are a school or you are a training center, the fact that, that's often the case. I was working with some schools, for example, in Central Asia, working in the agriculture sector, a different sector, and they would not know the employers around them. So their first homework for the management of that school, it was not, let's develop the skills for innovation. No, their first homework was go and get to know the companies that are around the school. It's very easy, but it's not. It seems easy, but it's not, because presentation, networking, ability to talk to others, it's a key competence. Christina was referring to the technical and transversal. This is valid also for who is managing schools, who is managing training centers, who is managing a company. So there are things that we can do. So knowing the territory, including work-based learning as an integral part of our program. So getting our students to approach the world of work before they enter in a safe environment, not only for them to advertise themselves, but for us as trainer to be able to observe, because maybe a student is great at school, and then in the moment I put the person in a working environment, this person shows that there are some competences we need to work out. So that's something we need to do in advance. A third thing is career guidance. Career guidance is probably one of the most neglected tools. If you see in many schools is a tick on the box. I observe you, I tell you. No, career guidance is a dialogue. It's a very heavy homework for the trainers and the teachers to be in a listening mode, but it's something which accompanies the transition much more efficiently than many tests or other things that I see happening in the training environment. So the question is not, okay, but is how we can accompany the process, knowing that we are exactly, when we talk about people, we are exactly in a pattern of innovation, meaning not linear.
This brings me back to an old project I was involved in. It was an Interreg project. It was called Agora in the Eastern Europe, and there was exactly very similar. We're trying to make a match between the skills available in certain countries, in certain cities, with needs for the job needs in other cities and countries, and trying to look out what was there on a larger territory affected by higher levels of unemployment, and match them together and find and creating these dialogues. So yeah, I think that was promising because we were going on the right direction. This confirms, and I think it's also kind of a good thing to keep going, like looking what's available, guiding each other, like to find a job. And I do have a couple of questions that relate to your comment, Manuela, but I see Emanuela has raised her hand, so please, Emanuela.
Oh, please go on with your questions, and then I will.
It was just one question on the relationship between how to establish good and working relationship with existing businesses and schools, formal, and to also how to integrate with this with a large bundle of informal activities that are raising informal training opportunities. So how do we actually match again these three elements?
Yeah, well, we are, I think all of you have heard also talking about micro-credentials and the fact that we go towards a future where we see a diversification, let's say, of the possibilities for people to build their own learning portfolio somehow. How? Well, how? I don't think there is a recipe. I think what you need to do is to observe those that do it and learn from practice. This is a practice skills. So even if I give you a lesson about interacting with the private sector, it's something where you have to, to dive in the water. It's like you have to allow yourself to just, dive and learn through, opportunities, mistakes, failures. What is important, I think, in the logic of building partnerships, and you will find one of the publications I will share with you on entrepreneurial communities has this kind of, list of things that are the basis of successful partnerships. Is of course the definition of a common objective, is the clarity, is the mutual interest, is also that all parties need to have an added value out of the collaboration. So for example, a company could be interested also in not only bringing students to the company, but using the schools for something. For example, you were mentioning hackathons. Now we see many companies that ask either vet schools, but also, I don't know, polytechnics, applied science universities. They ask students to come up with ideas to resolve a challenge. That's learning for the students, but is acceleration for a company. And this, the ideas the students have because of their exposure, because of their skills, because of their age as well, are normally quite valid. Of course, it's not, you know, like a full product, but there is a way also for companies to really benefit from the training environment, and also to use vet centers and training centers in general. I'm also talking about universities, of course, to also upskill and reskill their staff. The biggest challenge for the years to come in Europe, as well as in countries outside Europe, is upskilling and reskilling. So opening up our programs to adults and to offer opportunities for companies to use our training as part of their staff training programs. It's something that is a possibility, and I think also an area for partnership for the future. But the only thing I can say is, you know, go out and look for those opportunities.
All right. Thank you, Manuela. So, Manuela, I saw you had a question or a comment, please.
Yes, so there are many, but we have not so much time. But first of all, let me thank Manuela for accepting the invitation. And really, the expertise of ETF is really precious for Centrinno and in general for, I think, many Horizon projects. They are on research and innovation, but there is a lot we are doing on education and training, and that can learn from the ETF. So really thank Manuela. Really appreciated the many points that she highlighted and also the previous presentations. First of all, not a linear process. It's a complex process going the transition to the market. I have to say that in Centrinno, you also have the urban regeneration, which is also not a linear process and which adds complexity to this, how to link the Fab Labs and the vocational training centers to the urban regeneration and to the surroundings. But I think it was a key point. It was highlighted by Christina at the beginning, now by Manuela, about linking the spatial dimension with this training part, knowing the environment and the surrounding. Just to be, not to go too much about me with my comments, I would like to exchange further, but I have the question for Manuela, which is you talked about this excellence in training and this center for the level for these centers for excellence. How Centrinno or Centrinno partners and the centers can apply? Can they apply it? You say it's not just for neighboring countries, it's also for the EU. So maybe something that can be interesting. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I shared with you the page to the to our project on the international dimension of excellence. Here it's quite easy. What needs to be done is to contact us by email expressing your interest to be part of this network. The network of vocational excellence has centers that are, I would say, at different levels of maturity. So some are really excellence already, they're top of the top. And I'm also talking about, you know, centers that are in Turkey, in Morocco, in Serbia, you know, really excellence is really everywhere. With really great experiences. We also have centers from Ukraine that, for example, have continued working and really delivering incredible programs, for example, on green, but also on crafts, including during the war. So what happens is that we send you a questionnaire to be filled in. It's we call it a self-assessment. For us, it's a way to get to know the centers. So it's not an exclusion criteria, like if you have some areas that you are not super advanced, because the logic of the process of the project is exactly that, is the commitment towards excellence, and then it's joining the network to be able to build through partnerships, through peer learning, to exposure to different practices of different centers, and to move together towards that excellence that is sometimes an objective. So there are some centers that are more specialized in one area, and they also put these available to the other centers in the network to learn, to confront themselves, etc. And some other centers that, of course, need maybe to develop in some specific domain. To do this, we have some what we call sub-initiatives on topics that are of interest, so that they are voiced out by the network themselves. Those topics change every 2-3 years. So at the moment, we're working on green skills. We are working on inclusion. We are working on entrepreneurship, and including also an element of technology transfer, and in the context of vocational education and training. We're working on work-based learning. So there are different elements. We are working also on digitalization, and those sub-initiatives change based on the demands from experts.
Sounds really, really interesting. And Christine, I think
You're
about to send an email to Manuela. I don't know if there are questions also for Manuela from our Centrino partners. Do you have further questions? Otherwise, I have one comment, and then probably the last one if there are no more, because you were touching upon the reskilling, also touching upon with older workers, and one of the topics we're still discussing when preparing this workshop was exactly about how to recruit and to make sure and to bring back people to school, to learning pathways. I mean, it's not always extremely smooth and simple. I guess it's not linear, but here are like some best practice or success stories of how this can successfully happen.
Pietro, scusami, ripetimi la domanda, che I was looking for the email for the Network of Excellence. Sorry.
No worries. I was meaning one of the core challenges we do have in vocational training, in lifelong training on the reskilling, and is of course when you need to bring into this process, into this training, people that are of a certain age, that are not freshmen anymore. So how do you actually make sure to recruit these people in their 50s, 55, late 50s, early 60s? How do you make sure them to want to go back to school and to get involved in programs?
Yeah, well, there, I think there are many ways. It's true that for, let's say, senior learners is not always easy. First to admit that they have needs for learning, and also to dedicate time, because of life circumstances. So there, it's again the practice that is the best teacher here. So it's not theory. The first lesson from practice is to put up, in particular in companies, programs where you make also these somehow you break through some stereotypes, So for example, something I've seen in many companies is this shadowing, is matching a young person with a more senior person in an exchange somehow agreement. So the senior staff will mentor the young person on certain issues, and the young staff will mentor the senior one on others. For example, on digital skills, which is one of the issues where people very often don't admit they have a need, you know, and it's very difficult to break through. So coming up with programs where you have this intergenerational matching, I think it's interesting. The second is putting people in a safe zone. So it's very important to ensure that you know, they don't feel threatened by the fact that they have learning needs, but they look at this as an opportunity, not only to grow or to continue being employable, but also to embrace the active citizen. So it's important for people to understand that some of the skills where there is much attention, one is digital skills, for example. We just concluded a big survey both in Europe and in partner countries on digital skills, and it's clear that there is a big need and investments, in particular to train senior workers. But this is not only to work related, because today to be citizens that live in our society, and in 10 years down the road, if you miss digital skills, you're going to be, you know, it's going to be an issue, not for your work only, but for your life. So there is where also we need to work a bit to convey the message in a way which is safe, respectful, but also forward-looking. Now, statistics tell us that normally it's people who need less training that look for training. So we still have, and you know, one of the targets that we have in Europe is to bring 60% of adults in learning on a yearly basis, which is gigantic, you know, because if you think also, I mean, I think each of us, we can think to, you know, how much time we can spend in a year in learning. It's tough, huh? It's difficult. And so this is definitely the challenge of the future. But again, here I think is the communities of practice and sharing the good cases that give us the opportunity to learn and eventually to think what could work in the specific context where we are operating with the specific needs as well.
All right, yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I think the key lessons learned is like working by experience, try and error, like working on the practice and the communities of practices. Really fundamental thing for fostering vocational training, for fostering new skills, and to have them eventually valorize into the market to determine long-lasting change and to contribute to the just standardization. So I think this can be a good keyword for concluding this workshop. So I'm very happy for you to have accepted our invitation to join. So thank you very much to Manuela Prina from the European Training Foundation. Many thanks to Emanuela De Menna from the European Executive Research Agency, as well as to our CENTRINNO partners that gave a presentation. Karima Habas from Le Geste in Geneva, Katarina Schneider and Elsa Arnadottir from the Icelandic Textile Center in Blönduós, and last but not least, Cristina Olivotto and Carolina Becker from Onlefe again in Geneva, leading the CENTRINNO School. So it was really a pleasure having you all here. This meeting has been recorded, so it will be made available on YouTube CENTRINNO channel, and we are also going to write down some takeaway messages to be shared in our blog. So please refer there for further information, and of course we will mention your links and your insights in the takeaway messages. So thank you very much everyone for being here.